So thanks so
Not
much for joining, Monojit and Nitish. We're going to kick things off. And firstly, I just want to welcome everyone who has taken out the time today to join us for this session on advancing your career as an engineering leader. So, we have done quite a few of sessions for different kinds of audiences across different domains, tech being one of the major focus areas. This topic today is, I think, one of the most important ones. And we have been seeing a lot more people asking this question to us recently. So before I dive into it, I just want to share a bit of background about myself, about Pivot as well. And then Nitish and Monojit would love to hear a bit about your journeys as well. So just by way of background, I am Arjun. For people who don't know me, I am the founder of Pivot, which is a career tech startup. We help people make smooth and successful career transitions if they are changing their domain, their industry, their level in the organization, or even geographies. We have worked with almost 4,000 people so far to help them achieve their goals. And we do a couple of different things to help people get from point A to point B in their career. That's about Pivot. We'll talk more later during the session. But I do want to now just give Nitish and Monojit you a quick chance to talk about your background and what you're currently doing. Nitish, maybe we can go with you first, if that's okay.
Thanks, Arjun. Hey, everyone. I'm Nitish. I head engineering for the transport and driver businesses at Gojek. Gojek, in case you're not aware, is a super app based out of Indonesia. And we have businesses in Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam. Primarily a startup guy all through my life. I've had a variety of exposures, right from supply chain to e-commerce to hyperlocal delivery. That's what my background has been. Started off as an engineer, graduated through different roles in different geographies, different exposure areas, different varied experiences across the globe, right? Right across backend development, mobile apps, some amount of DevOps, if you may still call it. Again, it was very early days. The notion of DevOps was still being crystallized those days. But yeah, that's what I've done through my life. What do you know?
Perfect.
Hey, thank you so much. All right, so I have recently joined, right? Like, I'm just 2 months old in this new organization called Eduvanze. It's a startup again, Series B funded. We are into the business of lending, especially educational loans. But before that, close to 20 plus years spent in the industry. Started off with services / consulting companies, Deloitte Consulting, spent a lot of time there. Then JP Morgan Financial Services, spent close to 10 years there, and then moved over to another small firm, an asset management firm. And then had small stints in Amazon and Razorpay after that. And finally, I'm here. I think, again, mostly domain-wise, most of my experience has been centered around financial services / fintech. But technology clearly is something that, is my primary expertise, man. I'm not a domain guy. So yeah, so that's about me.
All right, great. Thank you both for sharing that. And I think we're ready to jump right into it. We have a close-knit group today. It seems like usually, there are going to be around 25, 30 people. So I would ask everybody who's in the room to perhaps switch on their cameras. It would make for a better and more interactive experience. We will discuss some of the key nuances with regard to how to advance in your career during the first few minutes. And then later on, we will open up the floor for questions for Nitish and Monojit as well. So feel free to turn on your cameras. And with that, I want to jump right into the first topic that we are going to focus on for today, which is, there's a lot of change happening within engineering, right? Always new tech stacks, new technologies coming through. Obviously, AI is the biggest elephant in the room right now with so many things happening there. It's not just a new technology, but it's kind of a new frontier for engineering altogether, right? And creating new kinds of roles and everything. So the first and most important thing that we hear from engineers who reach out to us for guidance in their careers is how do we identify the right kind of roles to target for our future in terms of the evolving tech stacks, the new skill sets that are required to future-proof your career, and think about it in a way that's very structured. So rather than just staying within my domain and in my comfort zone, how do I really diversify my experiences, my skill sets to grow into a more successful engineer? So it's a fairly broad question, Nitish, and I know the answer might vary depending on what kind of software engineer we're talking about, perhaps. But I wanted to start with you and get your perspective on this question.
Yeah, it's a pretty layered question, as you rightly pointed out, right? There's a lot of context that needs to be looked at before you get into specifics. So again, and try to be generic here. Again, feel free, anyone, if you have questions around it. But I think one thing, even when Arjun was going through his question, right, that comes across and which has probably been the biggest boon and to some the biggest bane of our world has been change, right? Most people would also agree, some of you have seen the industry long enough. Nothing in the software industry stays for long, right? Whether it's a particular coding standard that you follow or a framework that you've been using or a platform that is absolutely number one today. One thing's guaranteed, this will change. The landscape changes faster than what you can imagine any other industry, right? So the biggest quality that any engineer or leader needs to have is what I would call adaptability, right? And curiosity is something that one has to inculcate into themselves, right? Curiosity to understand what's going on, curiosity to absorb what's happening around you, right? A lot of it would be noise, and there is a risk of you being digressed too much or getting distracted into too many things happening versus being able to deep dive and focus into a certain area, right? So, and hence, I think it's a very nuanced question of where your focus should be and what should you pick up, right? But one thing that I would want each one of you to take home is be ready that whatever you're working on today should not become your comfort factor. It should not be that this is the only thing I can be an expert in, because see, the basics don't change as much, right? Design patterns 20 years ago, you can still leverage on top of it and keep building architectures or newer frameworks on top of it, right? So the basics remain the same. As long as you have the curiosity, you have the learnability to get into a new area and be able to deep dive and become an expert in, I don't think there is a worry in terms of how the landscape changes, right? But what's important is to be able to identify where your passion lies and what do you see as relevant at that point in time in terms of your career. What are you aspiring for? What is the next role that you're looking at? It's important to find that relevance, find that applicability, and be able to deep dive and get into that area. Right?
Yeah, thanks for that, Nitish. I know it was a more high-level question. Monojit, for you, similar question, but in a slightly different context. So a lot of people, especially engineers, they get highly influenced with the, flavor of the year, sort of a thing, right? So for example, last year, it was all about Web3 and blockchain. We saw a lot of engineers thinking about pivoting their careers or at least adding some sort of a blockchain expertise within their core technical skill set. This year, it's obviously changed to AI. So a lot of engineers now thinking about prompt engineering, building algorithms and those kind of things. So there's obviously things you need to do, as Nitish said, to get out of your comfort zone, understand what's happening in the market, and then be more agile and flexible to gain new skills. But you can't always gain every new skill that's making waves in the market, perhaps, right? At least that's what we would assume. So how do we think about this as a growing engineer? How do we think about, okay, XYZ is taking roots in the market. Should I chase that trend, or should I continue to build my core skill set or something else? I think you're on mute, Monojit.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think great question, right? I would like to build on what Nitish, just stated. clearly, I think over-indexing on fundamentals is the way to go, according to me, right? And you rightly said, right? Every year there will be a new trend or a fad. It's not a fad, right? That's a very wrong choice of word for something like a generative AI saying that it's a fad. I think it's a reality. But technology, the kind of innovations that we are seeing in technology, I think every year you should expect something new. You know, uh, a new skill or a new technology or a new space that suddenly is making a lot of waves in the industry. So that's going to happen. But I think as engineers, how do we really respond to changes like this is by focusing on the core fundamentals, right? Core fundamentals of problem solving, core fundamentals of system design, core fundamentals of design patterns, core fundamentals of understanding how to scale a particular solution, core fundamentals of how do you really address things like stability, maintainability, how do you deal with operational challenges once your application goes live, right? Those are some of the core fundamentals, I think, that will continue to stay relevant even even with any new trend or any emerging technology or cutting edge things that keep entering the market. So that's where I'll focus on. I think I'll build on my fundamentals. The other point that I want to highlight here is that we also need to understand that some of these cutting edge trends and technologies, while they are pretty exciting and generates a lot of interest, we also need to see whether there will be enough opportunities in the market, for everyone to really start working on them, in a proper customer facing business case, right? That is, for example, in artificial intelligence also, right? I've seen a lot of companies wanting to do artificial intelligence, but it's very rare to see an organization really finding the right use case to do artificial intelligence, right? So most of the times there'll be a data science team, but they'll be mostly working on statistical analysis or building data pipelines or doing normal data cleanup exercise, right? So artificial intelligence itself, finding the right use case has been a challenge for a lot of organizations. So even if I am able to get that particular skill, I don't know whether there will be an opportunity fitting that particular skill for me in the market, right? So my suggestion here will be, and something that I have also followed, is that if I have very strong core fundamentals of engineering, right, then it's just a matter of time for me to quickly pick up and build expertise in any particular technology or skill, right? I think the fungible skills of the basics is what I would master, and then it's just a matter of mastering the additional nuances of a particular technology that will get me there.
Yeah, so I think
Sorry,
Nitish, go ahead. Please go ahead.
I want to add some additional points to what Monojit was saying. Very relevant, right? Again, basics, and then there isn't anything that you won't be able to win over, right? And one personal principle that I follow, for example, again, to your question on how do you decide which one's relevant for me versus there are 20 out there, should I deep dive into the 20, right? Personally, what I do is, beyond the initial curiosity of what's there, what does it do, and what are the basics, and who's using it, and all, I try to find relevance to my world or wherever I am, right? That's a very quick and easy way for me to figure out if there's more to it or not, right? Otherwise, you are constantly jumping from one area to another and just become a jack of everything, right? But it helps me eliminate, as I call them, distractions, and figure out, okay, I do need to understand the first line of basics of this is what a certain technology is doing out there in the world. But beyond that, is it relevant for me? And also, a first couple of hello words helps me build an idea of whether I'll be passionate towards it or not, right? Whether it's relevant for me, does it help me solve a problem or not, right? That's how I usually go about any new technology coming out and seeing whether. And Monojit was also hinting to a similar problem on how organizations deal with it, right? There will always be a buzzword. You can create a data science team But if you can't find out the ROI for it, there's only a team doing nothing in that case, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point with regard to kind of finding relevance of the new stack or technology or whatever you are potentially considering in your own lives, find the use cases in your own life and sort of build on top of that. And it could be a personal or professional life, right? It doesn't have to be restricted to just to your professional life as well. Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. I think the next thing that we want to discuss is with regard to some of the key things that you both did to actually rise up the career ladder, so-called career ladder in terms of going from an individual contributor to perhaps a manager, and then to more senior roles where you're leading the entire tech arm within your organization. So I'm sure this is very subjective to every person. You have to figure your own path out to understand the steps that will help you rise within your specific organization. But what we have realized is a lot of people get sort of stuck at a certain ladder, right? And sometimes it's them and their kind of personal context, whether it's their lack of upskilling or lack of other things which are kind of holding them back. The other could be the organization's context, right? Maybe there are not so many opportunities within the organization to advance also. So we have seen, especially within engineers, there is a lot of stuckness, so-called stuckness that happened at different levels. So how do we, Monojit, maybe we can start with you on this one. How do we avoid, or how do we come out of this so-called stuckness problem to really keep growing, both as a professional, but also within the career ladder? Monojit, sorry, you're on mute again. Just unmute yourself.
I think, okay, got it. Hey,
Yeah.
so I'll be, I think brutally honest here. I think I have gone through this, in my career as well. And I remember those days, right, where couple of years where I've spent thinking about, that how do I get out of this situation? How do I get out of this rut? So one thing that I have learned over the course of years is that, first of all, you need to understand the craft that you are known for. Right? So as a technologist, if technology is not your primary craft, then clearly there's something wrong. This is my learning, right? And I don't know. So sometimes it may differ from person to person. It also depends upon you discovering your true competencies, right? But for me, what I have realized that whenever I have made technology as my primary craft, I think I have seen a lot of action in my career, right? And whenever I have tried to digress, from that core principle that let's try something else, that's where I have realized that, I'm getting into a zone where things are not really moving. There's no traction. I think it's very important to understand that what are the skills that we are bringing to the table. Okay. And then how do we really, play on those skills to advance our careers? Now, at the same time, I think I totally understand the spirit of this question that okay, technology is something that I have demonstrated in my role, right? I have demonstrated that I'm a master of technology. But then still, I think I can only reach to a certain point, right? Now I need to, elevate myself to the next level, and that requires some skills that are beyond technology. I totally agree, right? But there also, what I'm trying to say here is that you need to understand that in the technology world only, as you move across layers, you are solving the same problems, but at very different levels. So as a programmer, I'm solving problems which are 5,000 feet. But then as a manager, I'm suddenly solving problems that are 20,000 feet, right? Then as a senior engineering manager, I'm solving problems 50,000 feet, right? So what is really happening is that with the level of abstraction changing at each role, there are some new attributes and new skills that you need to demonstrate. I think one of the key ones that I have felt and is one of the most difficult to master is dealing with ambiguity, right? I think you will see that people who are getting promoted or moving to more critical decision making positions are the people who are very good at dealing with ambiguity, right? Because for example, a hands-on developer, right, who is supposed to write a code, they get a tech spec, and based on the tech spec they need to write a code. The level of ambiguity is very low. Compare this to an architect, right, who is looking at a business problem and then trying to come up with a system design. The level of ambiguity is pretty high. Now compare this to an even, someone like a director level person, right? They are trying to identify a business case and then, telling the stakeholders that this is the way we can address this particular business, right? That is a completely new level of ambiguity. So I think two things. One is that you continue to focus on and play on your primary competency and skills, whatever you're known for, that's your primary strength. But at the same time, start building on, some of these softer side, where you're dealing with ambiguity, you are being very, very proactive. For example, some of us might be feeling that we are in an area and I'm managing a legacy application, right, written in PHP and MySQL. And I have my friends who are working with cutting edge technologies like React JS and whatnot, right? So, there's no motivation in me because what is the point of me working in this older technologies? But no, I have seen a lot of people growing out of, such legacy technologies and technologies that we feel are old, but they are not really old, right? Uh, still a lot of organizations are currently running on stacks like LAMP, right? So, so it's, I think, just look at the opportunity that you have in hand instead of trying to fancy what you don't have, right? And see how you can turn that whatever you feel today is a comfort zone into an opportunity for yourself. By applying technology, by applying these softer aspects of, dealing with ambiguity, problem solving, looking at the bigger picture, trying to understand the customer problem, right? Those kind of things. So I think this is the way you suddenly, you get out of the comfort zone and then you see that you have elevated yourself to the next level of problem solving. So that's my philosophy, man, on this.
Yeah, no, I think very comprehensive and kind of makes intuitive sense to contextualize your technical skills within the larger business organization's context as well, right? Understanding how you can solve for the business problems. And that's where the ambiguity comes in, right? Because you know how to build a product, but you don't know how to solve the business problem necessarily with that product. So makes a lot of sense. Nitish, again, same question, and just want to get your understanding on some of the key strategies, philosophies, or any other mindsets even that you used to rise in your career.
Yep, absolutely, man. And Monojit wasn't alone when he said he's been there. All of us have been in that situation where what next becomes like a nightmare to decide, right? And I'll be honest as well, I wasn't a manager, or my first role as a manager wasn't by choice or wasn't something that I had asked for. But what really, and again, honestly, I hated my first role initially when I started off. I was so happy being in a corner writing code. What helped me get over that, and there was a reference to it in your question as well, was what am I really good at and what do I really want, right? And you hinted at a manager versus a leader in your question, right? And honestly, one of my mentors at that time really helped me unravel that there are strengths that I have, and there are things that I really aren't ever gonna be happy doing, right? And once that distinction became clear and I could relate to what my strengths are and how could I build a career and how could I scale myself through this journey, it became a lot more organic in terms of how I was thinking, how I was planning my career, and what do I do next, right? I started observing people who were playing that role. I started looking at, and again, a lot of them were very kind to me as well. They allowed me to sit down with them, observe them, be in meetings with them, right? And there were some meetings I had no business being at, but I was probably lucky enough to have the right mentors, and probably at times I was bold enough to ask, right, that I need to see you do this, right? Can I be in that room while you're doing it, right? And right, so a lot of us look at years of experience in a very transactional manner, right? But where it really plays a role, whether you're trying or aspiring to be a leader, whether you are aspiring to be an architect, aspiring to be anything, right? The number of war stories you can be in, the number of or the amount of exposure you can get yourself, even if you fail miserably, honestly, that counts a lot as you progress through your journey, right? So one of the key learnings for me was not to shy away because, hey, I'm not there and I'll not ask for that opportunity, right? I've literally done random asks from my managers, from my mentors saying, I want to do this, I want to get involved in there, right? Without the fear of failure or feeling bad about, hey, I didn't do a good enough job, right? So exposing yourself to areas that you know for a fact will help you get to the role you want to is probably the fastest way that you can learn those skills, right? Yes, there will always be books to read, people to talk to, but unless you've been there, you've exposed yourself, you've tried different strategies, you've made some decisions, it's not going to happen, right? And as you observe, right, at least for me, as I started observing some of the leaders I was looking up to, there were some characteristics that would really strike out, right? Monojit hinted at being adaptable, for example, right?
Right.
Along similar lines, I could see a discipline or a follow through that each one of them would have, right? They were very organized about how do you separate out one conversation to the next. When you are in the zone, you are literally focused in a certain area, right? Uh, Commitment to self-improvement was another thing that I could see in those, right? And as you could see those specific qualities stand out, I could very easily then create a roadmap for myself on how do I learn, what do I learn, whom do I talk to, how do I expose myself, right? That's been my strategy. Again, there wasn't a magic. It wasn't overnight. I struggled. I failed miserably. I made mistakes and I was shameless about it, right? No hiding from the fact. That's how I went about it. And yes, I was lucky along the way. And one thing I've learned in the industry for sure, nobody says no, right? So whoever you look up to, whoever you aspire to be, trust me, they'll be more than happy to help you out if you raise your hand and say, this is something that I would need your help to learn, right? There's no hiding from the fact that each one of us have leant over someone else and grasped something.
Yeah, I think, a lot of good pearls of wisdom there, honestly, because these are things that people don't always get to hear day to day on a day-to-day basis because they're so engrossed in their nitty-gritty work, right? So, for example, fear of failure is one of the biggest impediments to people's career growth, right? Because they feel like they know something, they're good at it, so they should just stick with it and not try something new or different, even though they could potentially have a better career or more growth there. So I love the point, Nitish, around, when you said that you were shameless almost in terms of going to your managers. I think that's how people have to be. Obviously, you have to frame your conversations, properly. But I think people do reciprocate when they see somebody who's hungry and ambitious to grow in their career. So I think very good points covered there. Before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to let everybody in the room know that in case you have any questions for Nitish or Monojit, please feel free to share in the chat section here, or you can also let us know. You can unmute yourself, come up on the stage, ask your question directly. In the meantime, what we'll do, just move on to one of the key questions and topics we discuss with our users on a day-to-day basis, which is navigating the job market. And right now, the job market is hell, right? It's quite something. And a lot of people don't know exactly how to navigate it, especially from a tech standpoint, because of the mass layoffs that have happened over the last year, and still continuing to happen in certain pockets and sectors. So a lot of times we hear people saying, hey, hold off, don't change your jobs. If you have a job, keep it secure right now because things are not that great. Other times people say, no, I mean, if you think you're unhappy in your job and you have a better opportunity, you should grab onto it, right? And then you combine that with the new trends that are happening. So people are trying to go after the more attractive roles, the more senior roles and all those things. A lot of mixed opinions, really, you know. So, Monojit, again, I'll bring you in first on this one and get your thoughts on how should a person who is currently, in an engineering role be thinking about navigating the job market if they are exploring an opportunity outside their organization.
Or again, a fantastic question, right? Because very relevant to what I have done in the past, right? I think there was a moment, I'll tell you, right? Again, uh, my own story. I think there were times where I was in this situation and I was looking out, but almost for 6 to 9 months, I did not receive a single call. And I was applying left, right, and center, right? Every opportunity that would come across, right? Every other job, uh, board, I would go ahead and apply whatever is available, and I would not get shortlisted. Forget about, uh, you know, getting an interview call. I would not even get an email or the recruiter reaching out to me and asking some basic questions, right? So clearly something was not right. And I think I was in the market after quite some time. So maybe I realized that I'm probably not doing the right things, right? There is something really wrong about, how I am really doing my searches or how am I presenting myself, to the market. So I think the first thing that the first realization was that, my resume needs a lot of work. And I continue to see this even today, right? When I get a lot of application for my open positions, I see that I can see through some of the resumes that this particular individual must be a very hard-working individual with the right skill set for the role. But the way they have designed their resume, right, it's absolutely something that does not appear to be highlighting that the competencies that they are known for, the kind of work that they have done, and what kind of relevance are they going to bring to this particular role, right? So that was a realization I had, when I was looking for a job and I was in the market. And it took me about 6 months to refine my resume, right? I'm not saying it will take everyone that much time, but I think I was not, I clearly it was a skill I was lacking, right? I think I was just trying to experiment with certain things in the resume, and I was thinking that okay, this is good enough because I was reading the resume from my perspective. I was not, getting into the feet of the recruiter or the hiring manager and then seeing whether the resume really is something that speaks to them about who I am. Right. So I think I did a lot of iterations and finally I got to a point where I started seeing the results, right? That with an effective resume that is very crisp, that really talks about who I am and the values that I can bring to the table. I think my resume was getting more hits in terms of getting shortlisted and getting interview calls. So I think my first advice clearly is that write a wonderful resume. And sometimes it's a very good practice to have multiple flavors and versions of your resume, right? Because you might be experimenting with various career options. That okay, let me see if I can do you know a data science. Can I make a foray into the data science world, right? So in that case, you cannot use the same resume. You need to then highlight your data science related skills in a resume, right? Instead of highlighting, something that you might have done in front end development, for example, right? Not easy to do, you know, easier said than done. But but you can create two or three different versions, right? With the right level of maybe the level of detail can vary, or the core competency that you want to highlight can vary. And then when you're applying for a particular job, then read the job description, understand the keywords, understand the competencies and strengths that the hiring manager is looking for, and then choose the right flavor and again do some level of customization before applying, right? I think that is the number one most important step. If your resume is not good enough, you are not even going to get a call, So that is the number one step. Getting a call itself is, according to me, 25 to 30% of journey is done. Because for a single role, you will see that there will be 100 plus applicants, out of which only maybe 15 or 20 are going to make it to the interview stage. So focus on that particular stage first, right? I think, and after that, I think we all know, right, that what kind of competencies are important for us. Look at a particular role. Don't apply for a role that you know that you are not good at. Just getting an interview call is not going to cut it, right? You might go there and only to embarrass yourself because you'll not be able to answer any questions. So understand the role that you're applying for. Make sure that you have the right competencies to be successful in that particular role. Understand the company, what the company is trying to do before the interview, and just be very confident in the interview about yourself, right? It's okay if you do not know every aspect of a particular technology, but as long as you are able to talk about the things that you have done and the experience that you bring, I think that most of the time is enough to impress the hiring manager, right? So start with your resume. I think I cannot uh, highlight that particular point enough.
Got it. Yeah, I think we heard that loud and clear. I think resume is definitely a great place to start and make sure you're not just sending something generic. You gotta personalize it, customize it to the roles and to your unique skills and stories. Nitish, how would you suggest that a person who's looking for or just considering an external opportunity in today's market, think about stepping outside their organization in terms of exploring new companies, new roles, and then start applying and interviewing?
I'll go slightly philosophical, if you may, right? You rightly pointed out the job market is difficult right now, right? And again, we live in a world of extremes, no hiding from the fact, right? A couple of years ago, it was the great resignation, which actually was a great hiring, termed differently. And then we went into the Great Depression, right? So, but the fact is, the basics never changed, right? Any business, any company exists for sustainability, for growth, right? It is just that we got into a bubble where overhyped investment numbers, inflated reputations, which made us believe that everything's so hunky dory. And again, one thing that I see a lot of engineers being guilty of is to assume grass is greener, right? What Monojit was referring to as customize your resume to what you're applying for, very relevant. But I would also say you will only be able to customize it if you know what you are going for, right? Spray and pray approach that he was hinting at, what people struggle with, is perennially going to be a problem, right? And especially if you look at especially the Indian background that all of us grow up with, right? We have that psychology of an exam syndrome, right? You have to qualify or you pass an exam and then you are good, otherwise you're not, right? And the more you get into the spray and pray approach and you see things not working out, the example that Monojit was giving, it just adds to that pressure, right? The peer pressure, oh my God, I'm getting desperate, I'm not getting this opportunity and all that, right? So it's very important to understand what are you aspiring for and why, right? Again, another bad syndrome I've seen is money becomes the decision maker, right? Yes, it's important. I'm not the one who will preach about money is not important. It is important, but it cannot be the only factor, right? I've seen enough friends, colleagues in the past who've gone for that money and first weekend they've struggled with the culture of the company, right? Because they didn't do the homework of what they were getting into, right? So to me, again, yes, there will always be ups and downs, right? And anyone of us who've lived through like the last 15, 20 years, we have seen like multiple recessions, right? Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's not as India centric. So we do not feel the tremors of it. But overall, if you look at the industry, every 3-4 years, it's a cyclical trend that something or other shakes up, right? But the respect or the need for a good engineer, a good leader is always there. Even now, if you go out, there will be enough companies who will treasure good talent, right? From an individual perspective, what is important is what culture works for me, what kind of people I want to work with, and what kind of problem areas do I want to expose myself. Absolute basics, right? If those make sense, that's the one I'll chase for. That's the one I'll apply, and I'll go to any levels to figure out how do I get into that interview, right? Monojit referred to a very good approach of how do you customize your resume so that the hiring manager, in that 20-30 seconds that he or she opens up your resume, you make a mark at that, right? Whom do you know at the company, right? Can you get a reference? Can you showcase your work even without sending in your resume, right? Can you participate into their hackathons? Can you participate into their bug bounty programs, right? There are enough ways in our world wherein you can showcase your talent or get that window of opportunity where you get to talk to someone, right? But very important is, and again, the other fact that we do not give enough credence to, any software company is a 24/7 job, right? Yes, every company works at the work-life balance and how do you differentiate work from your personal life. But we as engineers know that we are never able to switch off completely from the problem we were working at, right? So unless you really enjoy that domain, really enjoy that problem area, really enjoy working with your colleagues, it's going to be a very, very hard problem, right? So understand that what you're signing up for,
Yeah,
it's a paycheck at the end of the month, but there's a life that you're living along with your personal life as well, right? So a lot of research, a lot of preparation. And again, my core principle probably remains the same: be shameless on asking for that opportunity or showing up to showcase your talents.
great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nitish and Monojit, both of you. I think overall very optimistic and still practical thoughts. So, I mean, it was kind of, a good balanced opinion between understanding the ground realities of the job market right now, not kind of ignoring them, but at the same time, focusing on things that are in your control, right? The job market isn't, but the other things are, and trying to still, grow in your career. So I think that was super helpful. We have a few questions here in the chat. So I think what we can do now is maybe move on to some of these questions. And the first one that we have is from Akshay. And this hits it right on the money, like in the sense I was expecting and hoping somebody would ask this. So the question is, how important are skills like critical thinking, design thinking, storytelling, other soft skills that are important in today's changing world? And will AI ever be able to replace these kind of skills? Right. So AI, obviously, the biggest buzzword and trend of this year and probably the foreseeable future, I would say. Maybe Monojit, if you want to take this up first, that would be good, and then we can quickly get Nitish.
Sure. I think very difficult question to answer, right? Because no one really knows what AI will be able to replace. At this moment, AI is not replacing anything. That is something that I can guarantee. Right? A lot of people said that ChatGPT is going to replace developers, right? But we all know the ground reality. That's not going to happen. ChatGPT is going to be my personal assistant, as a developer, but it will not replace me. So these skills, right? The design thinking, storytelling, critical thinking, they're all fantastic skills to have. I think they have been relevant in the past. They'll continue to be relevant in the future also, right? You need to understand that basically, AI is something that you train. You are basically training a particular model, right? I think one day we'll be able to train a particular model that will have critical thinking, design thinking. I think we have seen some examples also. There are various YouTube videos where AI models are debating with experts and they are winning, right? So I think eventually that is also going to happen. But I think humans will continue to be, according to me, I'm very optimistic, right, in this. I know that we have seen movies like Matrix. I don't know whether this particular generation has seen or not, but in my generation, Matrix was like a revolutionary movie with this kind of thought process. But I think my firm belief is that humans will continue to have an edge over AI models because humans are training the AI models, right? The evolution that human brain is undergoing, you know, AI, I don't know whether it will be ever be able to catch up, right? The complexity that a human brain has, the complexity of the human thought process, of how two humans really interact with each other, and how can they really collaborate to create something big. I think those are some of the things which are very human, right?
Mhm.
Something that is very difficult to codify, but at the same time, I don't want to really, I'm not an expert in this. I'm amazed by the advances in the world of AI, but
Mhm.
I at the same time I don't think in the near term, and when I say near term, I think 5 to 10 years. I don't see how skills like this are not going to be relevant. They are going to be very very relevant. They'll continue to be relevant. They have been relevant in the past also.
Right. Got it. Yeah, just Monojit, in the interest of time, maybe we'll just quickly move on to Nitish. And Nitish, we do have 3 more questions at least to take up. So if you can be a little brief, but do share your candid thoughts on AI, because that is something that a lot of people have been thinking about today.
Yeah, again, I agree with Monojit that it won't replace humans as early as it's being predicted. But I'm a lot more optimistic about how soon can use cases be leveraged, right? If you look at, let's say, the world of content, for example, right? There are enough examples where ChatGPT, for example, helps you generate a lot of content, which for me earlier used to be a very monotonous task, right? The tone of wording, how do you position your text, and so on, right? Even if you look at Sal Khan's TEDx talk, right, where he talks about how Khan Academy is looking at AI as a personal tutor, not as an answering machine, but more as a tutor to help their students out. So I think there are some very interesting use cases where AI will play a part, right? But we do have to understand that uh, it's more a companion. It's more a tool which will help us be better prepared, right? The example that we were referring to in the question was around soft skills, right? To me, if you ask me, anyone growing through the engineering ladder or the leadership ladder, the biggest skill set you would need is the ability to influence, right? Yes, ChatGPT can generate content for you, but you are still the one who has to stand in the middle of the room to be able to influence that crowd, to be able to hold that room and say, this is what we are going with, and here are the
Mhm.
reasons, right? So to me, it's more a companion which you can leverage to your advantage in a big, big way, but it does not spare you from the hard reality of these are skills that I have to develop.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, very insightful. We will move on to the next question. So we have Arun, who has asked us about being a first time manager. So he says, as a first time manager, I feel it's easy for the person to get lost in the execution mode and not get enough time to think about the strategy or roadmap. Uh, so, how did you work around this problem where you didn't get lost just in the daily nitty gritties of execution, but you took out time to deliberately think about overall, perhaps your career strategy and the organization strategy and product roadmap. Monojit, we'll start with you.
Yeah, yeah, I'll keep it very brief, right? I think the answer to this is servant leadership, right? This is a hard lesson that I have learned myself in my career. Uh, I think once we graduate from an IC role to a manager role, you know, our, there's a tendency for us to try to continue to be an IC and do a lot of, be a little prescriptive and be a little directional to the team that what needs to be done. So we tend to provide a lot of solutions to the team that do it this way, do it that way, right? And that is the way we are getting stuck into the execution and not able to come out of it and think big or get into strategy. I think servant leadership is the answer, clearly, right? How do you really make your team, self-sufficient? right? Where your team is able to solve the problems. You don't have to get into the day-to-day execution, right? Are you grooming your team members? Are you finding your backups? Are you creating the right kind of skills and competencies within your team so that they are able to take up a business problem and solve it themselves? As a manager, you are not really supposed to do that. You are not supposed to solve the problems for your team. You are there to support them in case they are there's an impediment, they are getting stuck with something, they need,
Mhm.
they have a certain dependency, or or they need a certain support from you which they are not capable of helping themselves with. So be a
Mhm.
servant leader. Try to get into that role where you are a servant leader. You are letting them experiment with their own ideas. You are letting them experiment with their own solutions and fail. Help them recover from the failure. Shield them, uh, from the external, distractions that might, you know, divert from their goals, right? So that is your primary role as a manager. That should be your primary role, and not someone who is micromanaging people and telling them that how to solve a particular problem. No, absolutely not. The sooner you graduate to the role of a servant leader, I think the faster you will see you growing into a career of a leader, as a technology leader. Yeah, that's my brief answer to that.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may add, and I can relate to this as well, right? It's very easy to get sucked into that transaction mindset and what needs to happen where, and also the adrenaline rush of I'm making so many wheels churn, right? Uh, Very quickly, couple of uh, advices. Number one, organize like crazy. I think the question referred to not having enough opportunities or time to think strategic, think long term, right? So organize like crazy, right? When I started realizing this, I would literally put everything from reading emails to having lunch on the calendar. That's where I started off, right? And the other thing that one gets sucked into is you're also trying to keep a lot of people happy by saying yes, and that just keeps the transactional wheel churning all over again, right? So learn the skill, what to say no, how to quickly prioritize what's urgent versus not. And then the next problem you'll deal with once you are able to unblock that time problem is where do I start, right? A lot of people get sucked into, oh, I need a moonshot and a big crazy idea to make a mark because now I've created that time to think strategic and think long term. But the easiest way to start is to start questioning the status quo. Is it where you want to be? Is it something that's helping you, your team, or things can be better, right? That's how you start thinking or taking your first steps towards I've unblocked myself and this is how I take on my thinking cap and think long term. Sorry, Achin, go ahead.
No, no, absolutely. I think yeah, there's a lot to cover here, and you both have very helpful, insightful opinions because of the experiences that you have had in your career. But yeah, just in the interest of time, I think we have three more questions, so I just want to move along the process. We have the next question. This could be a little more black or white, perhaps, depending on who or which kind of role we are talking about. But Prasanna's question is, what does it really take to succeed as an engineering leader? Is it depth over breadth or vice versa? Basically, the question is focused on becoming a specialist versus a generalist, right? Which this is one of the most common questions we get, not just by engineers, but people across different domains, right? It's an age old question. And I think the heart of the matter that people are trying to get to is what is going to help me in my career?
Yeah.
Getting good at one or few things, or becoming kind of a jack of all trades. So Nitish, we'll start with you. We'll rotate the sequence this time. We'll start with you on this one.
Sure. One thing's for sure, you'll have to accept and live with the fact that you won't be an expert at everything, right? That's not happening. And even if you look at some of the leadership definitions, right? They'll talk about mobilizing others, right? They'll talk about inspiring your team or setting a vision, right? Effectively, that's what your role becomes, right? But you need to understand or be able to dig into the core of the problem very quickly, right? And Monojit earlier was talking about having your basics right? Making sure your foundations are clear, right? And those are things you can count on. So even if you are coming from a different technology background or you do not have expertise in a certain area, you need to understand how to peel those layers of onion so that you get to the crux of the problem, so that you can help the team, right? So the answer to your specific question of whether I should go breadth, whether I should go depth, unfortunately, the answer is a little bit of both, at least to me, right? You need to be an expert in certain areas and live with, or be able to live in peace that I won't understand everything, to which I will depend and lean on my team. But at the same time, because one thing you will be needed to do is make decisions, right? If there's one thing for which you will get paid for, or your salary comes to you, is because you make decisions. And how many of your decisions are right versus wrong is where your success or failure will get defined, unfortunately, right? So you will need to understand what's going on. So be able to put on that critical thinking hat to be able to understand what the data points are and how do you separate out noise from key insight. That's what your key skills will come into play. Sorry, Arjun, I was trying to rush.
No, thanks for sharing that. And apologies that I'm rushing both of you here. We're just kind of coming up on our time. We still have 2 more questions. Is it okay we cover these 2 additional questions very quickly? Monojit and Nitish, do you have 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So we'll take up the next question here. This one is from Vinay. And this is a curveball. I think this is a little bit of a different question than what we would have expected. Vinay's question is, I'm head of sales for an IoT vertical with 6 years experience and overall 15 years experience in sales. I don't have a technical background, and I'm currently doing certain courses, tech courses. How much technicality or technical knowledge is required for me to rise in my career or to get into my next role? So I don't know, Monojit, if you deal with or come across a lot of sales professionals in your job or in your career, but it would help if you can provide some context for people who are not hardcore techies, but have to either sell tech products or their job kind of depends on understanding certain technologies. How do they navigate their career and basically grow in their career?
I don't know whether I have understood this question. I don't know, Vinay, are you trying to make a switch to technology, or are you saying how do you want to, or you want to leverage technology to grow in the role of, within the sales function only? I mean, I don't think I understand the question. Is it about how?
I'm Vinay. Can I talk?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So I'm Vinay. I'm having more than 15 years of experience into sales. So coming to the present role, which I'm doing from past 6 years, and I'm the head of sales for the latest industry buzz of IoT, IIoT, and all. So whenever we go, we need to talk a bit technically, apart from whatever the sales or strategies that we are doing and all. So what I think, how much of technicality may be required, because if we talk about IoT, we maybe need a technicality regarding the electronics and electrical also, and a bit on the software side also. So how much we may need technically to jump into next roles? That's my question.
Got it. I understand the question.
Yeah.
I think again it goes back to the fundamentals, right? IoT is a very specialized area, right? It's a very specialized topic. So one can directly jump into IoT, but I think when you jump directly into something like IoT without having some level of fundamentals of how technology really works, I think you may struggle understanding some of the concepts and terminologies. I would suggest that, if since you are already doing certain courses, relevant technical courses, you already would have experienced that. Are you feeling comfortable with the concepts that are being discussed in the courses, or are you, constantly encountering new concepts and terms that you are not very familiar with? which is not helping you make progress. I think if that is the course, then I think you should just, double click on some of these terms and concepts and see that can you go down to a more fundamental course to begin with. For example, even IoT, right? IoT is all about a distributed system, right? It's about, multiple devices or sensors which are, geographically distributed, and they're sending data to a central server, right? At a very at a very high level. That's how I understand IoT. So it's a distributed system, right? So can you find out some courses where you understand how does this this kind of, how does this data aggregation and data capture really work? Where's the data stored, right? What kind of data storage is really used for, data that is coming in streams, right? So I think it all depends upon how comfortable you're feeling with the current courses that you are doing. If you feel that some of the concepts and terminologies are going over your head, maybe you should come down one level and see whether you can take up a course which is more fundamental in nature and then go back to specialized courses like IoT. That's what I can recommend.
Nitish, your thoughts as well. Yeah.
A word of advice again. I'm assuming you are still going to be a sales guy who's selling.
Yeah, I'm going to be in sales only.
Yeah. So again, I think the key point for me is to understand who your audience is. If you're talking more to a management team or CXOs, I don't think they are going to get into the details of architecture or how your chips are laid out and so on, right? So if you are looking at that kind of an audience, it's okay to understand it from an end user or a consumer facing perspective, right? You don't have to go into the depths of technology or how an IoT system actually works in the background, what technologies are being used and all that, right? If it's a product that you are selling, maybe some of these are already templatized as a question, but as long as you are able to handle yourself as an end user or a consumer who's using this product, and this is how I can benefit from this or the value that is driven out of it, I think that should be good enough for that audience. But if you're looking at getting into a room full of engineers who are going to grill you about how much of a battery is going to be utilized, how do you optimize this, how much bandwidth is the device going to use, I think at that stage it's better to lean on your engineering team and pull them into the room itself.
Oh, that's great. So for this purpose, I did a 45 days course from IIT Guwahati and all, so that I can talk about the technicality and all. So thanks for your suggestions. Yeah.
Those are very personalized feedback that you shared with Vane. And with that, I think we are going to wrap up today's session about 6 or 7 minutes late, but I think we covered a lot of good ground. And as you can see, we still had a couple of questions remaining. So there is a lot of potential here to, to unravel more topics and more concepts around how to grow in your engineering career. Perhaps we'll do another one at a later time, but I really want to thank everybody who joined today, took time out from the Thursday evening, especially Nitish and Monojit. Big thanks to you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the session, and feel free to share any final thoughts. Nitish, any parting thoughts?
No, thanks for setting this up. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining late in the evening. Really appreciate the session, the questions. So thank you for having me over.
Great.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for inviting me. Thoroughly enjoyed the session, and it was a pleasure, connecting with industry leaders like Nitish. So totally a pleasure.
Great. All right. And for everybody who's in the room, we do have Nitish and Monojit as industry mentors on our platform at Pivot. So in case you're looking for one-on-one guidance or any feedback as you're thinking about growing in your career or changing your job, you can connect with them on a one-on-one basis. You just have to visit our website. It's at mypivot.work. And I will be sharing the link here in chat. So feel free to take a look at it. But that's all for today, folks. And thank you again for joining. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.